by Ariel Lawhon. Should you read this book? We only have so many books that we can read in these short lives of ours. Is The Frozen River a book that you should read? Now, as always, I'm going to review this book with the knowledge that just because I may like a book or just because I may not like a book, that doesn't mean you won't, right? Everyone's got the types of books that they like, so I'm going to explain what I thought of this book, and then you're going to be able to take from it, maybe that's not going to bother me, or maybe that will bother me, this aspect that I did like. So let's get started to see if you should read this highly anticipated new release by the author who also wrote Codename Helene. Now, I feel really bad saying this because I know that Ariel Lawhon is a very popular author, and I have not actually read Codename Helene, and I want to read it. After reading this book, I want to read it, but I did not like The Frozen River. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Now, I know, judging by the Goodreads reviews that have already been posted about this book, this is an unpopular opinion. So far, the people that have posted about it have really liked this book. But for me personally, and I'm going to tell you why, and maybe you don't agree with me, and maybe you've already read this book and you think I'm an idiot, you loved it, feel free to put your hate in the comments below, whatever, that's part of the internet. But I didn't really like it, and I'm gonna explain why. But first of all, let me explain what the book is about. It's actually got a really interesting premise. As all of Ariel Lawhon's books, it is based on a real person. So it is based on the real life of a woman named Martha Ballard. She was a midwife. She delivered about 1,000 babies, I think more than 1,000 babies. In her lifetime, she lived in the late 1700s, so back when the United States... Yeah, it's bleeding. Sorry about that. My son just told me that his tooth almost got knocked out, so that's nice, but it was loose already. I honestly don't even know where I was, but I was explaining to you what the book is about. Like all of Ariel Lawhon's books, it's about a real life person. This one is about a woman named Martha Ballard. She lived in the late 1700s in New England, so Maine. So part of her life constituted before the United States was an official country, and then afterwards. Very early stages. And another thing, before I continue, there's no spoilers in this review as well, so if you haven't read this book, there's no spoilers. So the book opens up with somebody discovering a dead body inside the river, which is very coming close to freezing over. So there's a dead body inside of it, and because Martha Ballard has medical expertise, she's called to examine the body. Everyone can see before she even gets there that the man who has been murdered is Joshua Burgess. He is actually one of 2 men, so one of 2 men who have been accused of raping the minister's wife, Rebecca Foster. And one other thing about this book before I continue, yes, there is a description, this isn't a spoiler, but there is a description of rape in this book, so if that's something that you do not want to read, then either know that going in and know you're going to skip it, or just skip the book entirely. I wouldn't say it's like a brutal description, there's definitely parts of it that are left out, but it is described, it's not just, like not talked about. But anyways, after Martha examines this body, she determines that Joshua Burgess has been murdered. And then the book sort of moved forwards from there. There is this mystery, right? It's sort of like a 3-pronged novel, I would say, because there's the mystery of who killed Joshua Burgess. There is the trial of the remaining man who is accused of rape by Rebecca Foster. He is a judge named Joseph North. And then there's sort of like the goings-on of the town that Martha Ballard lives in with her family. So sort of like the story of her family, and this mystery, and then the trial. Now, the biggest issue that I had with this novel was that I didn't feel like the resolution of the mystery was earned. Like, there wasn't enough background information, there wasn't enough clues in the book. It was almost like there were things that were happening in the background, in the past, in parts of the novel that you'd never heard about. And then those were sort of brought to the end of the novel, and, then it was resolved. You figured out, who was the murderer. You found out what happened with the rape trial. And there were some other, smaller plot lines. But I just feel like there was a lot of character development that didn't happen. It was almost like I felt like that this book was a draft almost, and that it should have been reviewed one more time by an editor and then rewritten one more time. I don't know, it kind of felt like rushed to me. I know this was a GMA pick for December, Good Morning America Book Club pick for December, so maybe, I don't know, maybe the publisher knew that they had to get it out and they just kind of like rushed it out. To me, it felt like the book was 80% there. For example, the main villain of the novel, and this isn't a spoiler, you figure it out on page 10. The main villain, Joseph North, the judge who is accused of raping Rebecca Foster, I just couldn't understand his motivations, right? The motive of these crimes was never discussed, and then you found them at the end. You found the motives at the end, and you were like, now it makes sense. But you couldn't guess, right? There wasn't like this feeling of tension as the reader where you're wondering, oh, is this why? Is this why? There was no tension because there was no backstory. I didn't feel like a lot of characters were fully developed. And for example, another character that I felt like wasn't fully developed at all was one of Martha's sons, Jonathan. He's kind of like off in the periphery, and Martha has some tension with him, but you don't really understand why. Why doesn't Jonathan like his mother? Why is he the way that he is? Really all that you learn is that, Martha's like, well, kids are they're going to grow up the way they're going to grow up no matter what you do. And as a mom, yes, I agree. Like, that's true. But still, there's got to be a reason, right? I mean, it didn't make sense. And then there's a point in the story where somebody, I'm not going to say who, is falsely accused of Joshua Burgess's murder. And it's very apparent that the courts want to accuse him, but there's no, it doesn't make sense. Like, Martha gets it that the court is trying to pin it on him, but there's no clues for the reader as to why. It doesn't make any sense. And then, yes, it is resolved at the end, but it's all in the background. It's all outside of the book. All of these clues, all of these reasons, it's outside the book. It's not something that you can wonder about or suspect. I don't know, but that's just me. Maybe if I'm going to read a story that's a mystery, I want to try to be able to figure it out myself. Feel free to comment down below if, you just absolutely love this book, because I know a lot of people did. Feel free to comment, I'm an idiot. I get it. I have an opinion that's, not the most common opinion, but that's how I felt. But I will say, in terms of the ending, there was a particular, and if you do read this book, there was a particular part in the end that it would be a great book to discuss in a book club because of this particular part of the ending. I did like this little finishing touch, and I can't say it because, it's a spoiler, but if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there was a particular part at the end of this book that I was giving her a thumbs up for that. I mean, it was a good ending in that respect, and it would be juicy discussion right there. And she even talked about when she decided to do this, when she decided to end this character's story in this way, and she actually compared it to Lonesome Dove, which I'm reading right now, and she was like, well, he won a Pulitzer Prize for ending the book in this way, so I figure I could too. So that part I liked. And then another aspect of the book that I didn't like, and this is just kind of like a pet peeve of mine, maybe it totally works for you. And I was reading some of the Goodreads reviews, and a lot of people really, really loved Martha Ballard for her more open-minded views, right? She was a modern woman, but in my opinion, she was almost too modern. She was more like a modern woman for this day and age. But this is Puritan New England. So in the 1700s, I mean, no matter how open-minded you are, especially about the topic of sex, because obviously she's a midwife, right? So a lot of the book goes into how, a lot of these characters, they get pregnant before they get married, and, some women have babies out of wedlock. It's part of her job as a midwife, if the woman is giving birth out of wedlock, to ask the woman who is the father of your child, and she has to testify what their answer was. And this is a historical fact. And we all know, anyone who's read any book knows that people have been, bumping and grinding out of wedlock since the dawn of time. That's not the part that I thought was too modern. I just thought that her views about it were just too much a 21st century woman. And this is Puritan New England in the 1700s. I just thought it just didn't fit. I just didn't feel like it was a historical fiction book in that respect. It almost felt like a modern day book about a town where they chose not to use modern things. And then, Martha's husband, Ephraim, he was just so perfect in every way, just so the modern man that everyone dreams of. Again, I was like, I don't know, he seems too modern. Too perfect. I mean, I don't know, nobody's perfect. Nobody's that perfect. So it just was kind of it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when people try to put in modern sensibilities into characters that lived hundreds of years ago. So regardless, that is my review. I do actually think it would be a good book club pick for sure, because there is a lot that you could discuss, especially that part about the ending that I was like thumbs up on that part. And I will actually read Codename Helene because I want to see maybe this just wasn't one of her best efforts. I know Codename Helene is a huge fan favorite by a lot of people in the booktube community, so I do want to read that one because I want to sort of give this author her due. But this book, definitely not a favorite of mine. But again, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because I always try to review books with the knowledge that we all like different books. Our personal taste is our own personal taste. There's no reason to be apologetic for why you like a specific book or why you don't like a specific book. And as always, happy reading.